guys, welcome back to Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel today. And guys, today I'm going to be talking about the old school craw, really the original creature bait that people used 30 and 40 years ago. Guys, this old school craw that people don't hardly ever use anymore still catches tons of bass, and under the right situations it'll catch more bass than all the newfangled modern creature baits. So I'm going to show you guys how I like to fish it and rig it, and then we're going to go over the conditions that a craw outproduces the normal baits that we have. And also, guys, I'll link the Zoom makes a really good craw, so I'll put the Zoom craw link in the description of this video. If you guys would like to get a few packs, using that link's a really good way to support the channel here. Appreciate that. And also, guys, real quick, anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me for this spring, all you got to do is go to my Facebook page, Intuitive Angling with Randy Blaukat, shoot me a private message, and we'll cover about any technique you want to learn about for spring bass fishing or even later this summer. So thank you very much for that. Okay, guys, this is one of the very first soft plastic lures that I started using beyond a plastic worm. When I started first fishing bass fishing, all that I had was like a flip tail worm, a cream worm, and then you started getting some different type of plastic worms that showed up, some with straight tails, some curly tails. You had a few lizards people were using, and then probably about sometime during the 80s, the craw came out. And it's just a basic, it just looks like a really rudimentary crawdad, usually a flat body with pinchers on it like this. And I started using it extensively as a jig trailer and Texas rigging, and I've been catching fish on it ever since. And one of the things that showed me how effective it was a lot of people know who Tommy Biffle is, probably one of the most famous flipper and pitchers forever. And every time that I would see Tommy at a Bassmaster tournament back in the 80s and 90s, he'd have a craw as a jig trailer on all of his jigs. I mean, or a Texas rig. That's all he fished. And I started fishing them and catching a bunch of fish on them. So it's pretty basic. Let me show you how I like to rig them. I do like to use a straight shank hook. So I'll use this straight shank Gamakatsu Finesse worm hook. I'll link this in the description of the video too. Straight shank hook is by far the best with a craw, and I'll show you why here. The reason why, it just hooks the fish a lot better more than anything else. And just come through the bottom of it on the flat side. And a lot of you guys have heard me I hook my worms on the side. I don't do that on a craw because I want the craw to fall pretty flat. So I'll come, straight through the craw and then just come back in. And I've got a nice Texas rig craw like that. Now, the time that I use the Texas rig craw is normally if the fishing's a little bit tougher. Pitching and flipping around shallow cover, pitching and flipping around, in flooded cover, anything like that. When you're fishing a craw versus like a jig, a lot of times it's mixing it up and see what they want better that particular day because it goes back and forth. So the Texas rig is probably one of my favorite ways to fish it, just day in and day out like that. But the other way that I fish it is a jig trailer. And another thing about a craw, I'll tell you a little about the conditions that it works in. A craw is a really good bait in late spring and early summer. Now, I'm not sure what it is, but pretty much when that water temperature is between about 60 and 75 degrees is when I like to use a craw. And that's the other way I fish it, guys, is a jig trailer there. It works awesome as a jig trailer. Water temperature 65, 70 degrees, any type of shallow water cover. The jig and the craw setup and the regular craw is one of the best lures you can fish any type of flooded vegetation, which occurs a lot during this late spring and early summer. So if you have a lake that has flooded buckbrush, flooded willow trees, craw's an excellent bait for that. It's also just around any type of shallow cover. I mean, whatever that you have. It could be lily pad stems, shallow grass, docks, shallow wood, anything like that. I actually won a big Central Pro-Am tournament the first week of Beaver Lake, and I was using that jig with the craw trailer on it. And there's something about the profile of the craw being flat like that. It's just sometimes the mood and the personality of the bass appeal to it. Most soft plastic baits that you have are not near that thin. See how thin that is? That's like a quarter of an inch at the very most, maybe an eighth. And sometimes just that design and that profile that the craw has, and the fact that the claws they're very basic and simple, but they're very pronounced at the same time. So it's one of those mysteries in fishing. Sometimes they like a certain profile of soft plastic versus another. So let's say, for example, we're out fishing in April and May, and you got 100 different soft plastics you can choose from. You got a Cinco, you got a Texas rig worm, you got a beaver, you got a brush hog, you got a Z hog, you got a Z craw, you got a rage craw. You got all these different soft plastics out there. How do you know what the fish want? The only way that you can truly know that is you have to be getting a few bites. Once you start getting a few bites, and if you're like in a place where you can experiment, this is the time that you really want to experiment on different profiles. So let's say, for example, I'm getting a few bites, pitching and flipping a brush hog around boat docks. That's when I may try the craw. You know, if I'm getting a few bites and I know the fish are there and they're biting the slow bait, that's when I, try something a little bit different. And the craws come in a lot of different colors, guys. Black, blue, black chartreuse. They got some green pumpkins out there. It just depends on your water clarity and, sky conditions. But the main thing is just carry a few with you, guys. Get you 3 or 4 different colors of craws. Put them on, like my favorite is a 1/4 ounce or 5/16 ounce sinker with them, or as a jig trail or something like that, and just try it. Sometimes it works better, but I know for a fact that, in the springtime of the year, especially the later spring and early summer, for whatever reason, it's just something that the bass do that I can't explain. I don't have any, it's just my theory. I just know from fishing year after year and getting reproducible results on the same bait that when you got water temperatures, like I said, between 60 to 75 degrees, between like April and early June, a craw is an excellent soft plastic lure to try. So anyway, guys, Zoom link in the description to the craw there. Hope it helps you guys catch some, and we'll talk later.